Yeah, I mean, I think that communication skills in general is really important. I think that especially for our verbal individuals, being aware that communication, is all aspects of the social communication bridge. And many times at Communicamp, especially when I'm having these conversations with parents, I'll mention that for those individuals that maybe are verbal, but need those added tips for expression work, elaboration, right? Thinking about expanding more initiation skills. We also have to think about the nonverbal communication skills. And I think that I always tell people stage one on our social communication bridge isn't a lesser stage on the bridge, it's just a different skill. And so for many individuals, communication can also look like a parent stepping back while the child is starting to pay for more things. The child is starting to, order their own meal, even if it's nonverbal, but they're just starting to navigate on that front line more. It could look like them going to the movies and them paying for their own ticket or grabbing the ticket. It could look like going into a store and putting the things on, the conveyor belt and then them grabbing the to-go bag from the cashier instead of the parent. It could look like going to a relative's house and handing over the fruit platter instead of mom or dad. So all of these are different examples of ways to add even more social interaction, engagement, and communication, even non-verbally, because many of our individuals, especially our teens and young adults, even non-verbally, they don't have those
No, you're
communication
absolutely right. I'm
skills.
thinking of a teen I worked with just recently. They traveled in, we did a 2-day intensive, and the parents were all about needing to speak and wanting them to speak, and they had been in past treatment. Child's now very avoidant, very resistant. But when we really did a SCI, the social communication anxiety inventory, to determine where this, teen was functioning, he wasn't even able to give his credit card. He wasn't able
Yeah.
to wave to somebody across the street. He wasn't able to shake someone's hand to show that confidence when he was meeting somebody. He wasn't able to hand in his homework. He wasn't able to write in response to his teacher's questions. So he wasn't doing
Mm-hmm.
any of that. And how can
Yeah.
he, see what I mean? So I always say that the fuel for social communication to progress across that bridge is building up the areas of nonverbal social engagement, handing, taking. It stimulates eye contact. We demonstrate this all the time in sessions. We do it in the audience with camp where I'll hand something to somebody and I'll say, did you notice what happened? By me handing you that pen, you made eye contact with me. That is the
Yeah.
first step and fuel to social engagement and communication. Too many people are jumping right to speaking without building these necessary skills. The act of
Yeah.
head up, eye contact, smile, just greet them. That is a projection of confidence that many of these teens and adults lack. They slump, they have their head down, they don't look confident. So the message you're giving others isn't one of empowerment. It's one of leave me alone. Don't talk to me. I don't want to engage with you. I don't want to be with you. So some of our work is that confidence building in their nonverbal projection of themselves
Yeah.
in a positive way. And so by building these skills, you're increasing their independence because they see what they get back from others as head up, smiling, engaging as we work with them. I have to work on some to smile by just trying to get them to take this edge of their mouth up to their ears
Mm-hmm.
because some just can't even smile. They get that flat affect when they're anxious. So we have to, humor works great, but we have to work on these things. So building communication skills is critical as we're moving to build independence. Of course, that's in this whole process of social communication skills. As kids get older, teens and adults, financial literacy, something like, okay, it's not related to social communication, but to be able to have that ability to budget for themselves, to be able to manage their money. Too many times I work with parents with teens and adults that they're managing their finances. They're writing in
Mm-hmm.
their checkbook for their child. No, we need to get them to be more independent in their everyday life as they start to navigate towards going out and about, going to college, hopefully, getting a job, hopefully, moving out on their own, hopefully. And so we need to teach them all of this so they have that confidence. That's not like
Yeah.
a big area we can focus on today, but do you know what I mean? When, like, is that an area that you work on with the bank accounts,
Yeah.
having their own checkbooks?
I mean, not as much. I think, again, this is such a nuanced and like a case by case situation. I think that's definitely really important. And I think that's something that I have navigated with some of my clients. But I think that all the other pieces that we're kind of talking about, come first in terms of like building up more of their confidence, comfort, connection. And then that's kind of like, again, that's where like our goal work is so individualized. So we're sharing a lot of this information, and as we do in many of our podcasts, but again, each child and teen and young adult, even into later adulthood, is so different. So that could be something that I think definitely could be really helpful for our young adults for sure.
Yeah, when I deal with that, it's often some of my young adults that I work with that can verbalize and they're trying to become more independent. And I'm amazed how many don't manage their own financial situation or understand the budgeting process. So as we're building independence, this is an area that we may focus on. Like you said, it's not everyone. I want to talk about
Yeah.
self-care. I talk to a lot of parents and they'll tell me sometimes with their 13, 14-year-old, they need to remind them to shower, change their clothes, brush their hair, brush their teeth. Now, most are very conscious of those ages of looking good, smelling good, taking care of themselves. So when a child or when a teen rather, or a young adult isn't paying very close attention to grooming, to take self-care, it makes me wonder what else could be going on developmentally to think about. So again, I don't want to spend the entire rest of this podcast talking about it, but I work with so many teen families and adults where one of the biggest complaints from parents is they just don't care. Well, you know what? They
Yeah.
should care. And if they don't, there's something most likely developmentally going on that at that age when they've gone through puberty and they, are going out and about, they should care. Now, is there depression going on? Is there neurodivergence, autism spectrum disorder? Is there anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's really important. And like you mentioned, of course there could be some, neurodivergence to think about in terms of like them having to navigate or them even having, some adaptive functioning difficulties. I think that, like you mentioned, the socio-emotional piece is really important. And as we get older, again, the whys get a lot more complex, and there are a lot of comorbidities with socio-emotional challenges like depression, really high-end anxiety, various other factors. Some individuals, again, every individual is different, but I do think that if you're noticing a lot of these challenges, it is really important at that point to seek help and to make sure that, your individual is safe and that they aren't in a state where they're not feeling like they want to harm themselves or do anything. And so many times when I notice that sometimes someone isn't taking care of themselves, I think it's always really helpful to do a risk assessment and just make sure that they are at the point where, they that they feel safe, that you feel safe. And again, that is where a professional can definitely help you navigate that.
And just to kind of tangent off a little with the self-care, I think that for a neurotypical individual that can independently manage, when you're dealing with time management and goal setting, I think it's important that we think about the amount of sleep, limiting devices, really working on exercise, movement, because that boosts the feel-good chemicals, looking and physically feeling good. All of that builds the independence. So fitting into their time management, their schedule, their weekly schedule, times to exercise, what is their sleep hygiene, kind of the grooming, the showering, all of that should come natural for most teens and adults. And we talked about when it doesn't and how to kind of think about that. But it's important while they're working on their kind of independence that they do fill in with working out, even if it starts out with a bike in the basement or going for a family walk, getting that physical activity, going to the gym, joining dance classes or yoga classes, anything they can do to build themselves up will fuel their independence, which again will go back to confidence and kind of they're feeling good to connect and build that connection with people.